Hey, hello. Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I hope you've had a pleasant week. Mine has been tiresome, but I'm actually grateful, and I also want to give out a shout out to everyone who's been supporting my business, Miranda's Designs and Creations. I don't take you guys for granted. I'm really grateful for your support. I also want to say hi and welcome to anyone who's watching or coming to this channel for the first time. Please feel at home, and if you find this content useful to you, you can please subscribe, hit the subscription button. It's free. You can also hit the notification bell so that every time I post a new video, you will be notified. So yeah, let's get into it. Today I decided to just come up with this a segment on Wednesdays. Once every Wednesdays, I will be just talking about different topics, maybe different challenges that I faced, some of the things that I was able to learn and how I was able to overcome, sewing tips. And so I decided to call this section Let's Chat Wednesday. So I'll just be sharing with you different topics, and you can engage me, you can ask me questions, and I will be able to answer those. I'll also have like a question answer session, so we can do one of those in the coming weeks. And I hope that it will be helpful to you, that it will help you be a better sewer, or someone that you know. If you think this might be helpful to someone that you know, you can share the video, you can invite them to like this channel. So today I thought of sharing part of my journey in sewing, and that is how you can start sewing on a tight budget. And this is a personal experience of mine, and I just thought, let me put this out there. Maybe you could be at that point where I was when I was just starting to sew. And by the way, that was not too long ago. I didn't start sewing many years ago or something like that. Yeah, so I'm not a guru in this area. I'm still a work in progress, but I thought I could invite you to come along with this journey. And if you're also thinking about going into sewing, probably this is something that you'd want to follow. You'd want to follow this page, you want to subscribe, and hopefully you can learn a thing or two. So how can you start sewing on a tight budget? That is, if you don't have money to pay for, let's say, a fashion school, maybe you don't have money to pay for apprenticeship, or anything like that. What can you do? Okay, so there are a number of things that you need to look at. So for example, even before you start looking at how can I learn how to sew, what am I going to do, you need to decide things like which method would work best for you. Remember, there are many different methodologies that are out there on how you can learn how to sew. So for example, you can learn as an apprentice, where you actually learn from someone who's been sewing, they've been doing it for a while, and they've mastered that skill. So you sit in and you observe and you learn their techniques, and eventually you start cutting, and then you can begin to sew. So that is just one method. And you can also do apprenticeship with maybe an already established business or already established tailor or designer. You can approach them or apply to work and to learn from them. And if you go for such kind of settings, you probably will be asked to pay for that apprenticeship. I tried it at the time that I was starting, and I didn't have money. So when I was starting out on sewing, I'd also just started my PhD program. So most of my finances were going through funding that program, and it was very challenging for me to pay for another school to run concurrently, or to even pay for an apprenticeship. And that lady wasn't charging like a lot of money, but I couldn't afford that amount anyway. So if you go for someone or an organization or a company or a shop where they are already established and they're sewing and all that, they might ask you to pay for that apprenticeship. Okay, but you can also have a relation of yours. You can have a brother, you can have a sister, a mother, maybe your grandmother, your aunt, I don't know, your friend, somebody you know who knows how to sew and they are willing to teach you. Why not? You can start there and other things will follow. Okay, you can also learn sewing by using commercial patterns, and I don't know if this is the correct term for it, but by that I mean you use these patterns where the pattern is already designed for you, the instructions there, the sizes already on the pack. Okay, so this is just a sample. I bought it where one of the fabric shops, and you can see it's still sealed. I've not yet opened it, but so you can buy these patterns and they have instructions. The design is already there, so it will be these designs that will come on the cover, and then they'll come with all the instructions that you need in order to sew. Okay, so these are commercial patterns. You can learn to sew with these. Okay, so there's certain things that you need to learn. You need to understand or be able to read this pattern if you are going to sew using these. Otherwise your output will not be as accurate as it is supposed to be, because you don't know, you can't read, you don't know what it means when you see two lines. What does that mean? You don't know what a grain line looks like, for example. You don't know, so you need to go and learn if you are going to use these patterns. Okay, you can also learn how to draft pattern or pattern construction, and that is the route that I chose. I decided I wanted to be able to construct my own design, my own pattern, then put it on fabric before I cut and sew. Okay, so that's the route that I went. And of course you can also do a combination of these methods, and these are not the only ones. I'm just mentioning the ones that I know. There could be other methods out there. So you need to look at what will work for you. Sometimes it will be convenience. So if you have in mind the thought of, I want to learn pattern drafting, but here is your aunt who is willing to teach you how to sew, why not? Why are you going to hold on and say, no, I want to, because I want to learn pattern drafting? Start where you are, because that is available to you and you're not even going to pay. Okay, so start there, and later on you can be adding, you're going to add to your knowledge, you're going to add to your skill when you are comfortable and you have resources. Maybe you've got the time to learn that pattern drafting. It doesn't mean that if you start with using patterns, or you start with an apprenticeship, then you can't learn pattern drafting. You can actually use a combination of those three. Okay, so I went with a pattern drafting method and it's working for me, and I'm very happy. Okay, the first school, after I had settled down and I was able to raise money to pay to join fashion school, the first school that I joined, they don't teach pattern drafting. Okay, they teach using these patterns. So I joined anyway because it's near to where I live actually, and it was very affordable. I wasn't really on a high budget, but it's something that I could afford. And I said to myself, I will start, and then later on I will pursue what I really want to pursue in terms of sewing. And I must mention that I really was able to cement my foundation, coupled with the other things that I had already taught myself how to do. It really laid a good foundation, so that even when I went to the school that I wanted to go to, the tutors would ask me, are you sure you've only been sewing for such a short period of time? I said yes. It's because I was able to capitalize on what I learned from the first school. And my tutor at that school was Dr. Etienne, by the way. He's an experienced tutor. He's been sewing for over 30 years. So I really learned a lot from that, and I'm really, really, truly grateful for all the knowledge that they imparted in me. Okay, but when it was time for me to leave, I left and I joined a school where they teach how to construct and to draft your own patterns. So that is the first point that you want to consider, is which methodology are you going to go with. Okay, and see what suits into your plan, see what suits into your budget, and go for that. If there are other things that you want to learn, they will come and you will learn them along the way, because Even experienced sewers or designers or tailors, whatever you want to call them, they continue learning. Especially in the fashion industry, things change constantly. Over a short period of time, you have all these new designs that are coming, and you want to keep abreast with that. You want to learn all these new things that are coming up. Okay, so I'm going to do, I think, another video that talks about things that you should be looking out for, like what apps can you learn to use. Remember, we are now in a digital era, so you need to also sharpen your digital skills and be able to use those apps to help you further your skill. Okay, so after you have chosen which methodology works best for you, then you try to look around yourself and see what resources are available to you right now. At that moment, what can you use to further your skill? I wasn't able to pay for fashion school. I wasn't able to pay for apprenticeship. But I had one resource available to me. I had access to internet. Okay, so I took that and I was spending hours. I could stay hours studying pattern drafting, and I really started from the basics, from how to take measurement. And then one other thing you have to consider also is, or you have to take note of, there are certain things, it doesn't matter regardless of which method you're going to go with, they cut across the board. So for example, taking accurate measurements, whether you are doing apprenticeship or you are doing a combination of those methods or just one of them, you still need to learn how to take accurate measurements, because regardless of which way you've learned or which method you've learned, you will need to take accurate measurements in order to come up with those proper garments, right? So there are certain things that will cut across the board. So coming to the second point, I was talking about you recognizing and taking an opportunity to jump on the resources that are available to you right now. What is available to you? So I had access to internet, and I started studying online. Remember, at that time, I didn't even have money to buy a sewing machine. Later on, consider buying an overlocker machine. I didn't even know what an overlocker machine was. Then I knew that the stitch that it does, but I didn't even know what the machine was called. To me, it was just a sewing machine. The sewing machine did everything. It overlocked, it sewed, and all that. Okay, so I didn't have money to buy the machine. And so I went online and I started studying basics of how do you take accurate measurements. So I would just search for that on YouTube, for example, and there's all sorts of tutorials that will pop up, and they are free, most of them. They will pop up, but in that list, or on that list, I would have to obviously open and see, is this a tutorial, something that I can easily follow or not. And I was able to discover certain tutors whom I could follow, because I could easily understand the explanation, or the explanations or the tutorials were so detailed. It was easy to follow step by step. I could watch back and forth and rewind and do all that until I got the concept. Okay, so find people online. If you've got access to internet, go online. There are very good tutors that you can find, but you also have to be careful, right? It's not everyone that will be willing to teach you for free, and it's not everyone that is teaching you like the way it is supposed to be. So it took time for me to discover certain people that I follow, and I still follow those because I still learn from them. Okay, and that's why I call them my tutors. So I followed people like Lala. She has a YouTube channel called Way Lala. There is Blicky's Signatures. I followed Kim Dave. I followed Dummy Dimensions. Yeah, so and others, because I can easily follow. And there is also what's her name again? Okay, I know the last name is Abiola. Okay, I'll let you know when I've remembered the name. But the number of them that I started following, and I started studying the work, how they do it, and I would play over and over those tutorials until I understood the concept. okay? And then that brings me to point number 3. After I've watched those videos, and I was also on Facebook, by the way. So on YouTube and Facebook, those are the 2 platforms that I used a lot. And on Facebook, since I knew what I wanted to learn or which methodology I thought at the time would work for me, I went for sewing groups on Facebook that into pattern drafting, because that was my thing. And I still follow a lot of those sewing groups where they would put up an item, a dress or whatever, and then with it would be accompanied with how you would construct or draft the pattern. And I was interested in looking at how to draft that pattern, and then I would go and draft it myself. And that brings me to point number 3, where after I've watched and the concept has sunk, then I'd go to practice and practice and practice until your practice is written on your forehead, right? Yeah, I'm telling you, practice is key, especially if you are self-taught. It really makes a difference, because someone, for example, who is learning as an apprentice, they get to cut every day the same blouse or the same design. They can cut it several times in one day. So if you are going to go and cut let's say a basic bodice blouse, and you cut it once and you go, hey, I've done it, and okay, now I know, my friend, you're going to run into problems, because one time is not enough. You need to practice that concept several times, 100 times if you can, okay, so that it will sink in there, and you don't have to go back and forth watching and whatnot, because it would have sunk. You can go back to see where did you make a mistake, or where are you getting lost, okay? So practice is one word I cannot overemphasize if you're going to do this the way I did it, okay? So I was practicing and practicing in between my studies and data collection, research and all that. All my free time was going into looking at how I could better myself and how I could understand a certain concept. And for me, it really paid big time, okay? So practice until you practice and practice again, okay? So yeah, it really helps you master. And sometimes people will talk about things like, okay, I don't have money to buy fabrics, okay? You need to get creative. I tell you, some of the things that I do, I think my husband and my kids just thought, this one, she's going to go mad with this sewing thing, okay? Because I would buy cheap fabric, okay? You can buy calico, you can buy muslin, but where I live, like the areas where I buy these fabrics, for me, I find those to be quite expensive, okay? And we're talking about you sewing or learning how to sew on a budget. I don't know if these kinds of materials are more affordable. If there are, where you are, buy those and practice with them. But I found them to be quite pricey, and I didn't have that kind of money to spend on them. So I decided to buy a cheaper option. For me was to buy lining, the line that you put under your clothes. Yes, when you sew. That is what I went for, because for example, where I buy my fabrics, lining is, and I go for cotton lining, because the polyester one is kind of slippery and it's not very friendly to a beginner. So I decided to go for the cotton lining. And where I buy the fabric, so it ranges between, I would say, 11 to maybe 11 to 13 rand per meter, okay? If I buy calico is about 50 rand per meter, so it's expensive. In that 50 rand, I would buy like 4 or 3.5 meters of this lining, and it's just for practice purposes. So I opted for lining. So that is one of the things that you can do. Buy cheap fabric where you can practice, because after you've watched these videos and these tutorials, you want to practice and see if you can cut and how that will come out, okay? And because it's not very expensive, you won't go like, I just wasted my money, or what, I spoiled this fabric. It's cheap fabric, okay? And you might also say, I don't have even that money to buy that cheap fabric you're talking about. Hey, let me tell you one thing that I did. So the first fashion school that I joined, the school organizes a fashion show every December at the end of the year. And so one of the pieces that I was going to make was a palazzo pant. I had watched those tutorials on how to cut palazzo pants back and forth, but it's something that I never tried out. Okay, but I just thought I want to make one because I like palazzo pants, I like jumpsuits. That is my thing. Okay, so I decided to look for fabric in the house. I didn't even use the cheap fabric that I buy or the other fabrics that I have. I used an old bed sheet of mine. I used an old bed sheet. Yeah, this may sound funny. Sometimes I look back, I'm like, yeah, hey, I come from far. I took one of the old bed sheets of mine. I cut that palazzo, and it didn't fit well because my crotch measurement was not accurate. It was actually tight on the crotch. I couldn't even sit comfortably, so I had to cut it again because I said I don't want to drop this crotch. I want to cut it from zero again and do everything all over. So there was still enough piece left from that bed sheet, and I cut that palazzo pant, and it was a perfect fit. Then I went on to cut on my fabric. So you just have to be creative, look around you, and again, my emphasis is look at what is available to you right now in that moment. Okay, so I did use a used bed sheet, an old bed sheet of mine, and then also at one time I was trying to make a skirt. I didn't have money to buy this cheap fabric, and I also wasn't willing to cut one of my fabrics that I had in store. So I took this dress. I had this ball gown dress that I'd worn once to an event, and it had so much material, it had a tail even, but I just wore it once, and it had been lying in my wardrobe for several years, 5 or 6 years. So I took that dress, I undid the seam, so I separated the bodice to the skirt, and I removed, because it had gathers, so I removed the stitches to open up the gathers, and I had plenty of fabric to work with. So I used that to practice, and I was able to practice with about 3 or so pieces that I was sewing then. So look around you. What is available to you? What can you use to practice? What are the resources that you have right now? Let's forget about you don't have money, you don't have this and that, but there must be something that you have right now. You can even use like an old curtain, for example, and curtains have a lot of fabric. So yeah, for me, I feel blessed because by the way, I am Zambian by birth. I grew up in Zambia, and so my sisters from home would send me the wrappers, you know, the African print wrappers that we normally wear back home. So they would send plenty of those. And then when I got married, my husband is from Mozambique, so we lived in Mozambique for 11 years or so. And in Mozambique, hey, we like to party. Every event, we every little occasion we celebrate, and in those celebrations you get gifted these wrappers. We call them kapulanas there. So I had plenty of those kapulanas as well. I had just so much of those African wrappers. And in Mozambique, they make these 6-meter wrappers that you can use. They have a lot of fabric. It's called a mukume. So I had also plenty of those to work with. Even during lockdown, this is something that actually helped me a lot. You know, I would make pieces during lockdown, and everyone was going, where are you buying the fabric? Which fabric shop is open? And I was like, hey, I have a master plan. I don't depend on those. So yeah, I had actually a lot of fabric, the African wrappers, the kapulanas, the chitenges, vitenges, plenty of those. So to me, that was handy. Even when I was struggling to get money to buy fabrics, I'll just go and look in that whole bunch. And I started with the ones that I really didn't like so much. Maybe I didn't like the colors, or I didn't like the print, and I wasn't like, it wasn't a big deal for me to cut those. Okay, so I went for those, and I was able to practice and sew. So look around you and see what you can use to actually practice your skill, whatever it is you are learning, whichever method that you are going through, at one point you must start cutting and then sew. Okay, so these are a number of things that you can use. There was another alternative that I took up, and I jumped on that because I like to read. So if you're not a person who likes to read, maybe this might not apply to you. I like to read. So there is this lady, she's from Kenya, and she sells the Masai wear, the beaded bracelets, earrings, the necklaces, sandals. She makes handbags, hand-woven handbags and stuff like that. And then next to her is another lady, also from Kenya, who sells books. So she sells romantic novels, and then she's got another section for children, storybooks and stuff like that. So I would normally pass through that place just to greet them, because it reminded me of my time in Nairobi. I studied in Nairobi many moons ago. So it was just I felt good when I heard them speak Swahili. One day I was going into one of the shops and I heard them speaking. So I just said hi to them. Are you from Kenya? And yeah, so we created a rapport. So every time I was at that shopping mall, I would go through their place to look at their wares. I would like to buy like earrings. It just took me back like 15 years ago when I was in Nairobi and studying there. So I had never bothered to look at the books that this other lady was selling, because I saw the kind of books that were there. It's not something that interested me anyway. So one day when I was there by their place, I just thought, hey mama, do you have any books on sewing? And she told me, yeah, actually I have a book here. That book, believe me, it wasn't even on the display. It was packed somewhere under in a box in the shelves. And she said, I have this and I have more at home. I was like, really, can I see it? And when she showed me, that was a gold mine for me. And this actually became one of the reference points that I would go to. Sometimes I would follow or take a tutorial online, and I would not understand certain things, so I would go to that book and it explained it so well. Especially for a beginner, it shows you how to make like buttonholes, how to put in a zipper, the kinds of zippers, just the basic things that a beginner would really benefit from. So it became not even one of my favorite books. It was the only book that I owned on sewing at that time. Okay, it was the only book and my favorite book. So yeah, it really helped me. It was just something that I would refer to, and I would read that book often. And if I saw something that I was not getting in the book or understanding in the book, then I would go look for a tutorial online to see if there was a tutor somewhere who could explain it in simpler terms for me as a beginner. Okay, so that became another option. And these books were not new books. These are pre-owned books, second-hand books. And according to that lady, she bought them. There was this university here in Johannesburg that was closing off their fashion and designing department. So they were selling things out. They were selling mannequins, books, name it. They were selling patterns and all that. Even the sewing tools themselves, the curved rulers and all those things. But for her, what interested her was the books, because it was in her line of business. So she rushed, she bought a whole bunch, and she was there now complaining to me of how she had wasted her money and no one was really looking to buy those books. People were reading online and stuff like that. I said to her, I need those books. I can't afford them now. Remember, I also didn't have money. So I said I will pay for them in bits. So I bought the first book, and then a month later I got a number, and then I asked for 2 books like that. And from her, in total, I bought 10 books. And those books are precious to me. I have really learned a lot. There is one of the books that talks about how to sew lingerie, for example. And that is one of the other things that you also have to decide as you go, especially if you want to do sewing for commercial or as a business. which line are you going to concentrate on. I'm going to do another tutorial, or rather a video on the business sense, or the business side of how you can do your fashion and designing, because there's certain things that you still have to decide. You can't be all over and you say you sew for everybody and you sew everything. You might be able to sew a bit of everything, but you must have like a principal line that is your main line. Okay, so like in that book, I'm not into sewing lingeries, underwear, and night gowns or night clothing, but I was still able to learn something from there, because when you are talking about sewing undergarments, you are dealing with very delicate fabrics rather. It's the sheer fabric, it's the silk, it's the lace, and how do you handle such materials. So I was learning from that. There were books that just took you through the like generally, and so that was very helpful. I'm also going to do another video on my sewing books and give a review of a few of those, so keep watching my channel and you can learn a thing or two. I'll also be able to give you links to those books and other soft copy books, because you can still get online books, free downloadable sewing books that can help you. But that is for people who like reading. If you don't like reading, probably this won't work for you. It worked for me, so I'm just sharing with you to say these are some of the things that you can do in the meantime, as you try to organize yourself to get your monies and your financial status right. Okay, and then I decided also to just get rid of cutting phobia. There are people who will tell you, "Hi, you've been studying for 3 months or I don't know, 4 weeks or whatever, and you're already cutting on fabric." It's like a big deal to certain people, and it would amaze me. Okay, so I just said to myself, fabric is just fabric, it's just material. If I mess it up, I must learn from that mistake and move on. Even these people who are sewing gurus, they've been sewing for years and years, they make mistakes. Do you think that they stay and cry about, "Oh, my fabric, what, no, I won't cut again"? Because you are not going to be able to grow. Okay, there are certain things that you have to do, like investing in yourself. Not everything will come for you for free. Maybe as you start off, because you don't have another option, but surely you must get to a point where you will need to invest. If you're going to do this as a business, then you need to invest in your machine, you need to invest in your sewing tools, you need to invest more in learning, and this might require money, because not everyone might be willing to teach you for free. Okay, if you're going to learn this just for yourself as a hobby, you're still going to need to invest, because if you don't have a sewing machine, it will be difficult for you to say, "Okay, I know how to sew, but now I don't have a machine." Okay, even if it means you have to buy a second-hand machine, buy it. It's an investment. Even when you are starting, when I started, I didn't even have a machine. That's why I started by studying the patterns, because I really was into pattern drafting. I wanted to do that because I didn't want to be moving with all these patterns. If I move somewhere, I'm moving with patterns. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying sewing by patterns is not a good way. It just doesn't work for me. It might work for you. So at some point, you also will have to invest into something. I was saying that I didn't have a sewing machine when I started. So I went online, because that resource of going online was available to me at that time, and it still is available. So I would be able to study, to understand how do you take measurements, how do you do a basic bodice block, how do you do a basic body skirt, and with those two, you can actually make a dress. Okay, and I started learning by that. How do you go about making a sleeve block, a basic sleeve block? How do you go about that? Those are things that I was learning and I was practicing. I would draft them on paper, then I would cut them using all those cheap fabrics that I had, or available fabrics to me at that time. And by the time I got a sewing machine, I had the concepts there, but now I had to work on the practical part of it. So I think my husband must have thought, this woman is going mad. I really was not sleeping. That is how determined I was. I would spend all my free time learning and studying. And one day he just surprised me with a machine. He bought a domestic machine. It's a heavy duty Singer, and it has been working perfectly, and it's something that I used during my learning process. I was able to acquire other machines, but I started with one domestic machine. So don't think now I don't have resources, I won't be able to buy an industrial machine and overlocker. Hey, just start. If where you are doing your apprenticeship, if you're an apprentice, you are able to access the machine, practice as much as you can while you are there, because maybe you don't have a machine at your house and maybe it will take you time to get it. When you get an opportunity, it's a pre-owned machine. As long as it is working, buy it. You will be able to upgrade as you go. So I always tell people, start where you are. Other things you will build on as you go on in your journey. So yeah, those are some of the things that I did, and I still continue studying pattern drafting, because there are patterns that I still, when I look at it, I don't understand. Okay, so that's why I'm saying I'm also a learning, a learning process. It's a learning curve, and really I don't think you ever finish learning. You will always learn something new each passing day, but your determination will also determine how you'll be. If you at all, you'll be able to determine your to achieve your objective. Remember, if you're not willing to invest on yourself, you will always have that talent. That raw talent will always be there, but it will remain raw. Okay, so if you want to take it to another level, you have to keep on working on yourself and grab opportunities that come along. So sometimes just a small window will open. Like I was saying, you might know this somebody who is able or willing to teach you for free as an apprentice. Why are you going to hold that and say, no, me, I want to learn in a fashion school? Go and start learning. By the time you are able to go to that fashion school, people, I'm telling you, so by the time that you are able to go to that fashion school, to that tailoring school, you will not be at zero momomo. No, you would have knowledge, you would have invested in yourself, and you will find your journey even plain sailing. Okay, because there are certain things that you already know. Maybe you just need a further explanation on how to go about certain things, so you will be able to acquire that knowledge. It will stay there. Okay, what will make it stay there and stick there is practice. Practice all the time. Practice as many times as you can, one segment at a time. Don't try to overwhelm yourself, because sometimes you want to jump to go and do a very complicated style. If you think you can do it, it's fine, but I would advise you to start with simple patterns and then go and build on that gradually. It's like you are building a house. You just don't start from the roof. You're going to fall and your house is going to collapse. You start slowly, you build slowly, and then you will get there as you go. Okay, so that was just me sharing my journey, how I started on a very tight budget. You can actually do this, and I know people who have learned how to sew online totally, and they never stepped into a fashion school. But that depends on how dedicated you are and making sure that this thing works for you. Otherwise, there are other ways also that you can achieve this. This was just my journey, and I'm not saying it's the best way, but I'm saying this worked for me. Maybe it might work for you, or it might work for someone that you know. So if this video has been, or this content has been helpful for you or to you, please consider subscribing, hit the subscription button, and also click on the notification bell so that every time I post a new video, you will be notified. Okay, so I'm going to wish you all blessings, and I hope to see you on our next video and our next tutorial. Stay blessed. Bye.